Joining me now is Mitch Landrieu, national co-chair of the Biden re-election campaign. So first of all, what is your reaction and the campaign's reaction to the historic guilty verdict for Donald Trump? I know the president said that jury's verdicts have to be, respected. The justice system needs to be respected. But how do you handle this as a campaign issue?
Well, I think it's important to remind ourselves and everybody else that democracy is at stake in this election, and Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. In order for democracy to work, an independent judiciary has to be able to do what it is that they were designed to do by the Constitution. The president, the former president, had a fair trial. The former president was able to call witnesses. The former president was able to have a jury of his peers, and a unanimous jury, 34 counts, find him guilty. So we have a new fact before us now, is that Donald Trump is a convicted felon. And when you think about it, it actually goes to the character, the wisdom and judgment of the person who is going to sit as president of the United States. You actually see the character of President Biden playing out today with Hunter's trial. He has a son who, as you know, suffered from addiction in his life. And this president showed the character of faith, family, and country. He loves his son unconditionally. That is exactly what a father should do. And the president rightly today said, I am the president, but I'm also a father. That is handling a very, very difficult issue with great dignity. And just to remind the people in this country, Hunter is not running for president of the United States. Joe Biden is, and Donald Trump is. And I think that when you measure their character, wisdom, and judgment, you understand very clearly that Donald Trump is a danger to our democracy. He is running a campaign of revenge and retribution. Joe Biden gets up every day thinking about the American people and putting them first. And that's going to be the clear choice in November, notwithstanding what any jury does between now and then.
Mitch, recent Snap polls after the verdict just in the last couple of days show that a majority of voters agree with the verdict. But these results are not appreciably different than the feelings of voters as to how they would react before the verdict. And these Snap polls also are not likely conclusive. This hasn't set in yet, and people haven't fully adjusted to it. So how is the campaign going to counteract the way the Republican-based voters are energized? Clearly, look at the amount of money they raised. Whether it's accurate once we see the filings, it's clearly a ton of money, an astonishing amount of money. They claim $70 million in just the last couple of days.
Well, you have to be careful what they claim, because they're generally not telling the truth. But be that as it may, everybody's going to fundraise off of this. But the simple fact remains, whether Donald Trump is a convicted felon or not, we have an election. And the only way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office is for Americans to go vote. And that's what campaigns are about. That is why Joe Biden always talks about the fact that when Donald Trump was president, he lost 2.5 million jobs. Thousands of people were dying from COVID, and would remind them that he said that, you guys ought to drink a little bit of bleach, that he actually participated in an insurrection in our country and is responsible for the Confederate flag in the halls of Congress for the first time in the history of the country since the Civil War. They will remember the chaos. They will remember the 17 cabinet members that have left Donald Trump's office and begged us not to go back, and come to the understanding that the people who know Donald Trump the best, Michael Cohen's of the world, the Kellys of the world, have said, listen, the guy's dangerous. Joe Biden, on the other hand, will talk about the 15.5 million jobs that he created, the lowest unemployment rate, the fact that we are going after inflation. An earlier report that you have said that Donald Trump's plans are going to just skyrocket costs for the American people. That fight is the fight that's going to happen on Election Day, and the American people will be the final jury.
Mitch Landrieu, though, Americans are not reacting that way. They're not giving the president credit for the lower unemployment rate. They're not giving him credit for that inflation is coming down, because they're seeing gas prices, food prices, the things that they have to deal with, home rentals, are just higher, than they want them to be, or higher than they've been. And the gas prices are not likely to come down with the OPEC 2 decision today as well. So, these things are not getting across to people. And, you've twice now in this interview, twice that I've counted, called Donald Trump a convicted felon. We were guided by some other people inside the White House that they were not going to refer to him as convicted felon. They would talk about the judicial system and the importance of the integrity of the judicial system. But is the campaign going to be a lot more aggressive, both on the economic front, which is what people really care about, and also on, shelling it, being very blunt about what's happened in that courtroom?
Well, I don't know what's inappropriate or wrong about stating a fact. Donald Trump is a convicted felon, and if the other cases, if this in fact was the weakest case, and the other three go to trial at any time, he's likely to be a convicted felon 4 times over. That goes to the issue of character in the campaign, about wisdom and about judgment, and whether or not you want that person to have his hands on the nuclear code. So clearly, in the campaign, we're going to show the difference between the character, the wisdom, and judgment of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Secondly, on the issue of inflation, inflation is too high. Prices are too high, which is why the President of the United States has been working to lower costs. It's the reason why he went after Big Pharma, to make sure everybody's pharmaceutical prices were low. $35 for insulin now. It used to be $400. Donald Trump, in fact, wants to reverse the Inflation Reduction Act, which was the authority President Biden used to get those costs lower. So if Donald Trump comes into office and he reverses the Inflation Reduction Act, everybody's pharmaceutical costs are going to go back up. You had a number of people on before who were going to say if Donald Trump's tax cuts, again, for the wealthiest 1%, give away $2 trillion or $3 trillion, it not only is going to balloon the deficit, that their costs are going to go up. Andre, this is what campaigns are about. We're 5 months out. We have to tell our story to the American people. I think the American people will pay attention and focus more than they have maybe in the past 6 months. And that when they have to decide between a president, Joe Biden, who gets up every day fighting for them, and a Donald Trump who gets up fighting for himself and wanting to hurt other people with the power that he has, I believe they're going to choose Joe Biden.
And finally, you see him often, I assume, as a top campaign official. How much is the Hunter Biden trial weighing on him?
Well, and listen, Hunter Biden suffered from an addiction, like millions and millions of Americans, and any families that have gone through this know that it is unbelievably heartbreaking and trying, especially on parents and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles. So I know that the president, like any great father would be, this goes to the issue of him. He has unconditional love for his kids. He is a man of faith, family, and country. So there's no doubt that it weighs on him. But Joe Biden's strong. I mean, he knows what's going on. He's rooted in faith, and he's been through tougher things in his life. But as a father, I know his heart breaks for his son. But as he said this morning in his own words, he's very, very proud, as he should be, as family should be, about folks that have gone through addiction, who have got clean and gotten their life on track. And Hunter Biden has, and I know his daddy's really proud of him today.
Mitch Landrieu, as always, Mr. Mayor, it's great to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.